I don't believe that balance exists. I believe it's wholeness.
I'm whole to begin with, but I have work to do.
Wholeness to me is being able to be your own bridge to your heart, through your heart.
We are back with Will Edgel. He came out to his family at the age of 17, and because he knows firsthand the support needed, he now specializes in working with gay men to help them live their best lives. I admire Will so much. I guess I was expecting Will to advocate and educate me on the woes of living a lifestyle that many openly ridicule and harass. But instead, he chooses to build up and support his clients in a way that empowers them to see and live beyond the difficulties. I think this conversation is an important one to have, and I think you will be amazed at how relevant the things he teaches has in all of our lives. 92, am I right? 1992, I was beginning my senior year of high school, and I had decided that instead of going to my high school, I was going to go and take college. I could go, instead of spending my time at the high school, I could actually apply and go to college. So I did that. And I remember sitting in my first class. It was a communications class, an English credit. A couple of weeks go by, and I'm sitting in class, and I see him walk in the door for the first time. And I looked at him, and I mean, bang, like, oh. And what's funny, it's a funny story because, and some people know this, but me and my husband were born on the same day in the same hospital. Same day, same hospital. And then my sister was in Japan, and then he was in Japan. His dad worked for the Air Force, and so they had met and found out that we had the same birthday. When she came home, she's like, "Oh, he lives, around like a half hour away. You guys will have to meet someday, right?" So I knew where this guy was from, and I knew this guy in my class was from the same town. So I was trying to get with my sister to find out who this guy was that she knew, so that I could go and meet this guy that I thought was the hottest thing ever. Like every time I see him, I would get the tickles in my tummy. You'd get the like flutters in your heart. And finally, one day, we were sitting there, and one of the teachers, I'm trying to make the story a long story short, but one of the teachers asked him to do something and asked him his name. And sure enough, it was the same name as my husband, which is, his name is Monty. And like, there's not too many Montys my age, So I thought, oh, this is the same guy, right? This is the same guy. And I tell that story because I did not plan on, that moment when I saw him, there was this flash of spark. I did not try to have that spark. I did not know I was going to have that spark, and guess what? A few years later, we got married. We actually got married. And so I think about that whenever I'm interacting with someone on the LGBTQ spectrum, I remember that because I honor the fact that what they're telling me is a story that I know. I know that story. I've been in that situation. I choose to kind of just recognize that we're more alike than different.
Yeah, so I love that story that you shared, and I think it just shows like just how natural attraction is. And as a gay person, identify as gay, that has been a very natural experience towards men. And, I've had a lot of guy crushes over the years. I'm 33 now. And right now I'm in a relationship with a guy. We've been together for almost 3 years. And that process of falling in love with him is just so natural and just like so easy. And growing up in a heterosexual world, knowing that's like, oh, that shouldn't be like, we, like that's wrong, or it's, pervertive, or whatever the thought process is. It's hard when that's kind of just your natural experience. It's like, I didn't choose this and I didn't want this. Like, this makes my life so much more complicated, but that's just what it is. It's just the natural reaction. And I mean, professionally, as I'm a wellness coach, I work specifically with the gay population. And one of the main areas that I do focus on is shame. And I address, holistically, a lot of other things, but shame is just such a common experience. We all have shame, no matter if you're gay or heterosexual or any walk of life. Shame is just a part of life. And what's fascinating about shame, it's an emotion, and like any emotion, it plays a purpose in our life. Our body and brain, they are designed to help us survive and also to thrive and to live healthy, functioning lives. And we have the emotional experience of living, and those emotions are meant to help us survive and to cope with life. And shame specifically is a social emotion, which is fascinating. It's the only emotion that requires the existence of other people to experience. We wouldn't have shame if we were the only person on the earth. It wouldn't exist. And the purpose of that shame, if you think of like, maybe in our modern world, it's like less, we're less having to survive. But like in more primitive times, or times when, you're in a smaller population, it is really important to blend in. If we don't blend in, it could cause us to get killed. It could cause us to not thrive within our clan or our group. And so it is a very powerful and important emotion for that purpose. And what shame does, the emotional response that it causes us to do, is to hide. So again, it plays a role. However, just like a lot of other negative emotions, like sadness, anger, fear, guilt, shame, if we hold on to shame throughout our lives, if we are living our lives in hiding, that's going to have a very negative effect on us. And that is a very common experience within the gay population. Many of us, went through years and years of being closeted, of hiding parts of ourselves. And what that could turn into is, I can't let anyone see me. I can't let my real self be shown to the world. If my true self was known, I would be rejected. I would be no longer loved. So there's so many associated wounds that gay people specifically carry with that shame. And that's what I'm very passionate about addressing. For some people, it means coming out of the closet and like kind of embracing and loving themselves and hopefully finding some acceptance and love on the other side of sharing with people their sexuality. Everyone has a different journey. Some people are able to they don't, it's not shame and it's not a negative thing. They just, it's like, oh, I don't need to address it, and they're not wounded by it. But many of us are, and it has a very real toll. It's not a surprise that suicide rates within the LGBTQ population are as high as they are, because shame can be deadly. Just like any other emotion, it can lead you to a place that is not safe and is not well. And that hiding taken to the extreme is no longer wanting to be here. It's like, that's like the ultimate hiding. It's like, no longer being here, I don't exist. And so, I'm very passionate about helping people work through shame, release that shame, find worth and value, and honoring that shame, but then seeing what life is like on the other side of that shame, which is, my hope for everyone is to find love, peace, joy, all of the high vibration experiences that can help people thrive. most people aren't able to thrive when they are living with an immense amount of shame.
I was looking up some statistics, kind of preparing and suicide to talk about suicide because that's really the importance to me of why I want to have these conversations because if we're worried about epidemics and we have an epidemic of suicide in the United States and Canada and it's something that I need to it might not be something that is totally mine, but in an epidemic I'm going to do what I can to help my friends and neighbors get through this epidemic, right? Because suicide is the second leading cause of death among young people ages 10 to 24. So the second leading cause of death, that was by a study that was put out in 2018. And gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer, and questioning youth are at significantly high risk of suicide. That's just the fact. They are more than 4 times as likely to attempt than their peers. And it estimates that 1.8 million LGBTQ plus youth seriously consider suicide each year. And there's at least one attempt every 45 seconds. That is just too much for us to turn our head and say, because I'm sorry, a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old, even a 16-year-old, I don't know. Again, I go back to my own experience. I don't know if I could have manufactured feelings towards someone that were not there or tried to suppress feelings that were there. It wasn't something I had to deal with. In fact, I even in the study, for whatever reason, it reminded me of in World War II, in World War II, acceptability was determined by hair color, by eye color. They actually had little charts that they would put up and they would decide whether you were acceptable in German society or not based on characteristics, nose width. I mean, they literally had charts that they looked at, things that we would hardly even notice today in 2023. In fact, a lot of beauty magazines have all sorts of these, that they're almost more beautiful the more exotic people will look, or the more different they look. That's kind of how we are almost 100 years later. And so it makes me think, what will that be like in 100 years from now? Will this, judging of what this is supposed to look like, I just can't imagine it'll look the same in 100 years. It's kind of interesting. But what have you noticed? You've talked about shame, and what other are unique components of healing is there for people that identify as gay? Are there, obviously they have moments of discrimination, maybe moments of self, do you find that there's more outward shame, or is there this inward shame that seems to be the most detrimental to the gay community?
Yeah, I would say shame is the big one. Gay people are just as, we're all human, right? And so we all share those different emotions and experiences. Some people carry anger, sadness, whatever it may be. And those are just as important to address. Shame, I think, and as far as my focus on shame, it's kind of the elephant in the room, but again, like, there's a lot of, we all, no matter what your walk in life is, we all have different areas that need addressing. Shame is the big one. And
would you say that there's like a shame? So I feel like it's like somebody gets shamed, and that's a little different than feeling shame, or, like I'm not enough versus being shamed.
Where my coaching philosophy and what I believe is we are ultimately responsible for our lives and our emotional state and our beliefs about ourselves in the world. No one else actually can ultimately take that on for ourselves. And we can grow up in horrific situations, and ultimately it's ourselves that receive the wounds and the negative things. And so I like that, and I I have complete empathy for people who grow up in situations that are severely homophobic and dangerous. And, it doesn't surprise me that they are wounded, emotionally wounded, and carry so much shame. But, we are at cause in our life. We get to choose, we do choose how we respond to the world around us. Viktor Frankl is a great example of that, being in a Holocaust camp and being able to, find purpose and meaning, and being able to kind of defeat the odds of being able to survive that situation. And so even in the most dire situations, we can still take ownership of our lives and how we choose to respond to those external factors. And so certainly people can be very shaming, right? They can say like, oh my gosh, like, any negative I am statement, like, or you are statement, just like, you are ugly, you are awful, that's disgusting, all the things. But it's how we take that in that ultimately matters. And so people can say things like, on the internet, people can say really rude comments, but it's up to me. Do I want to experience shame out of that? And hopefully, the goal is to be shame resilient, and just resilient in general. And so it's like, what? They can think what they want. I'm not going to take that on. And and we see that, there are some very confident gay people, and I love it. So, they just like, more the flamboyant type. They're just like, hey, I'm queer and I'm here, and like, get over it. And it's like, oh my gosh. And it's not like they didn't grow up in a very homophobic world either. They've just, maybe they have this innate ability to just be confident and not care what other people think. And so I don't blame for people, like, it totally makes sense why shame is such a big part of the community. I've experienced shame. I still have shame around a lot of things, but I can take my power back and empower myself and choose to release that. And that can be a process. It can be a process to build that resiliency. But we don't have to be victims. And that's what I'm passionate about, is to help the gay community become resilient and to become, confident and create our lives. Like, we have so much potential. We are so, as a community, we have so much to offer, both, in professional settings, but also in religious settings. Like, I'm still connected to my religious faith, and, and that's really important to me. And I think it's a shame when, it is literally a shame when people drive us out of society and try to quiet us. And, I'm not talking about like, political advocacy or anything like that. I'm just saying like our presence deserves to be here, and we deserve, just like anyone else, to contribute and to let our light shine. And for whatever reason, we have this experience of being attracted, I have this experience of being attracted to the same gender. And, that's my lived experience. I get to do what I want with that. And I don't have to hold on to shame through the process. I can live openly and live my best life, and also be able to help others live their best life, because that's so important that we support each other in our journeys.
Yeah, in this moment, I'm just realizing how vital and valuable that your work is, because you can say this. That would be it comes so much different coming from you to another than it would be from me, and I like that, because that's true. I guess if I was working with a client, you would go through, okay, I can either, we might need to take a moment, and we might need to honor those painful moments. But ultimately, we want to build that resilience. We want to empower you. I like the word empower you to be unstoppable, to be just all that you are fully, potentially. And when you walk into a room with the confidence and the energy that says, I am enough, most people will honor that and show up with you for that, and the ones that don't, it's probably their own their own things that they're hitting up. So what I'm hearing you say is the more important work is for you to build people, the gay community, up to a point where they are so at ease within themselves that life shows up with ease, because of that. Is that how you would say it? Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I think that's so important.
So yeah, one of the things I shared in my last podcast with you, the formula, and one of the big elements of the formula is knowing what you want in life. And when you are crippled with shame, I'll say it that way, when you're crippled with shame, you are cut off. Your energy is cut off, and it actually will most likely reduce creativity and reduce your own autonomy in being able to create the life that you want for yourself, because you have to hide. And that hiding says, there's something about me that is wrong, and I can't trust myself because I'm, flawed or whatever that is. And so what often happens is they will adopt what society tells them to do or what their parents tell them to do. And they can be living other people's lives because they've become disconnected or disassociate from their own experience. And from that place, it's like, oh, you're just going to, fine. You're not going to, live the life that you feel passionate about, and you're going to live someone else's life. And so it really is sad that shame can completely take out the excitement of life and cause you to not know what you want and not even give yourself room to say, what do I want to create in this life because of it? And so a lot of that's one of the devastating impacts is not stepping into your soul's desires and just doing what society tells you to do. Which, society has a lot of good things that tells us to do. But if we're not taking ownership of that, it's something very soul sucking to just live someone else's life and be operating on other people's terms. And so when we get rid of shame, which is one of the things, again, shame has a purpose. So we all have shame flare up, and that's fine. But if we can get rid of the past shame and living in shame, then we are able to open ourselves up to the creative potential of living life authentically and openly and powerfully, what we were meant to do.
Mm-hmm. And I wonder, I don't know where the term in the closet came from. Maybe I didn't look that up or whatever, but I visualize as you're talking. Yeah, if I'm having a family party and I'm in the closet, I'm not able, I'm talking just physically, the words are muffled, the sights of what are happening, I'm missing out on, because there's this barrier between me and the other people that is put up, and over generations of time, that barrier has been different. It's been race in some instances. It's been, it's just this, we construct these barriers that kind of make it feel like someone's the other. And I really appreciate that your resolve to that, or the medication for that is to build and grow the human being. And so I think one thing to address is, I think maybe if we have shame on one end, maybe the antidote, maybe the other side of that is pride. Maybe that's what that represents, is maybe the pride is an antidote to the shame. It's instead of having this deep feeling, maybe we've got this pride, and maybe we can look at it that way when it comes time to celebrate pride. And
yeah, I think there's a few ways of looking at the word pride, and there's maybe a more negative way of viewing it, but I mean, we use it in our word I am proud of you, son, or I'm proud of so another way of seeing that word is just self-worth, and being able to feel love and accepted is another way of seeing that. And so yeah, I think it's just interesting, right? We're not we're all very complex beings, and we all have different ways that we respond to life. And so I'm not saying like in order to get rid of shame, you have to be open about everything. No, it's actually completely appropriate to like not like we are not obligated to share everything with everyone. And I'm not saying every gay person has to come out of the closet, or if you have any sort of attraction along the spectrum of sexuality that you need to share that with the world. What I am saying though is, if there is shame around a particular area of our life, shame being this I need to hide out of survival. If I get found out, I will be rejected, and there's a lot of fear that can come out of that, and potential wounds that might limit you around like some limiting beliefs. I believe that some work would be beneficial around that, and that could mean directly, deciding to do the reverse and being very open about that. It could also mean doing some work. I do like timeline therapy. I do some work on releasing some of those emotions, and doing some of that release work doesn't require that like you tell the world. Brene Brown, she's done a lot of work around shame. She talks a lot about how one of the ways to release shame is to be vulnerable with people that we would consider to be safe, right? We don't want to just like share all of our stuff with people that are like, why are you telling me this? Or have a really bad reaction. It's best to like start in a place that's like, okay, a trusting person that you've developed that relationship with. That can be a very helpful way of reducing shame in our life. And that for a lot of people is coming out. And some people do that very quietly with a few people that are important to them. Some people do it online. They share a Facebook post or whatever it may be. And some people, it's super valuable to parade down a street in a major city. And that's a way of celebrating themselves. And that can be very healing. Are there shadowy sides to the gay community and that expression? Totally. You can become you can kind of go to the extremes. And so we are looking for balance, and, the gay community can sometimes be labeled as being like overly sexualized, and that, where someone's super, super repressed, and then they kind of go the opposite and they want to share everything. And so literally they're almost naked in front of everyone down a city street. Like, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to be, say what's right and wrong in that instance. That could be very healing for that person to do it in that way, but also recognizing, having the pendulum swing from one side to the other could also be an unhealthy expression. And so we want to be careful. I mean, I honor everyone's way of living life. But we can, go from one extreme to the other, and that could be also an unhealthy expression of another type of emotion. So there's that balance.
Yeah, that often happens. It feels like freedom to be on the other end of the spectrum, but it's just because, maybe it's in relation to how bound someone has felt. Any time we move to the opposite end, sometimes that's a step. Sometimes that's an important step. Sometimes it's vital for some people. But soon we've got to find out what's authentic to the individual. And I hope to educate through this podcast is that it's not just a group of people, but it's a spectrum of individuals, and in fact, just for myself, I wanted to look up, because we've gone, there's lots of jokes sometimes, and it's even said by people in the gay community, like we're getting that LGBTQ is getting longer and longer, and there's kind of this joke, but I kind of just wanted to pause for a second, because at this point in 2023, from what I found, the official is LGBTQIP2SA. And I just wanted to take a moment and pause on this, because it's easy to say, oh my gosh, but if you're, in my life, this has come into my life. And once it hits your life, it becomes important. So I just wanted to say, this is what this represents for those of us. So we have lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, intersex, pansexual, twin-spirited, and asexual. And right underneath that is people are like, what's twin-spirited? And I know we could roll our eyes like, who's going to call themselves stop? But when I read what it is in indigenous and other native lands, they have different levels of, it's natural in those cultures to have, they don't have a binary system of gender. They have it's a very different spectrum, and it's very culturally based. So it may not be something that resonates with me or I grew up with, but it's very much part of their culture to have something that they have narrowed down to this two-spirited is what they call it, two-spirited, I guess, idea. And once I read that, I went, oh, well, that makes sense. It's just something I'm not familiar with, but it's something that they grew up with every day, and we're including that into the spectrum. But and just coming up with some ideas, I looked at the American Psychological Association. I'll put all the links to these in the show notes, but their take was, they said, since 1975, the American Psychological Association has called on psychologists to take the lead in removing the stigma of mental illness that has long been associated with lesbian, gay, and bisexual orientations. The discipline of psychology is concerned with the well-being of people and groups. So the prejudice and discrimination that people who identify as lesbian, gay, or bisexually regularly experience have been shown to have negative psychological effects. So I just thought that was interesting that the American Psychological Association says since 1975 we've been trying to fight against these kind of things, which we're coming on, what is that, 30, 40, 50 years of this conversation about human beings and trying to define who they are, and who they are, who someone else is, and call it different because it's different, to think that there's something wrong. So I just think it's time, because we need you. Our world needs you, or you wouldn't be here. Our world is in balance because you exist. We don't want you to go anywhere. There's people that love you, people whose lives are impacted and are bettered because of you. And if we can empower you to find a way that you can stay, that you can have joy and peace and happiness and the ability to thrive in your life, that's what we want. That's what we want for you. That's a version of wholeness that we're hoping extends to that segment of our society. And we could go into all sorts of arguments. There's all the arguments about how that shows up genetically and things like that. I do have a link about the science behind sexual orientation. I also have a link to the Trevor Project. I think is super important to that educates people on. And I think they do it in a way that's just kind, like that they're just informing you about people's experiences. And so I've got a link there. It shows a state-by-state survey as far as what states in the United States, how that's looking in each state. So you could look up your state and see how you can get involved in the support of humans. And I wanted to know something from, if you would help us, is there number one, is there anything that would be helpful in that coming out? And then also, for when someone comes out to you, is there something that we can have on hand, something that we can be aware of to say and to do in these moments of vulnerability, so that we can just feel a little more empowered on both ends of that conversation?
Yeah, definitely. Those are great questions. So in talking to the gay individual, especially the one that may not have come out or has a lot of shame around this experience, I would hope to convey that there's nothing wrong with you. There's, you exist for a reason. I do believe in a creator, in a God, and there's a reason why we exist on the planet. And, I don't have all the answers. I do know that my experience with being gay has helped me be more empathetic to other minority groups or people who don't fit the mold. It's helped me have a softer heart and be able to, I mean, I am in the profession of helping others. And I do believe that, you know, that the root of that has been, you know, my own struggles and all my own challenges that I've had to work through. And now I want to support others. And I've just seen so many gay people that have just the biggest hearts, and they're some of the best people. They are some of the most spiritual people. They're geniuses. They are creative. They are very successful. And I've seen what we can accomplish and what we can do and contribute to this world, despite the critics, the people that maybe don't like us or have prejudice against this experience. We're a very resilient people. And so I would hope that if you are gay and if you are listening, and if you experience same-sex attraction or any variation, you know, in the LGBTQ plus spectrum, that you can recognize that, like, that you are here for a reason. And you know, you hear this a lot, and maybe it's a little cliche, but God doesn't make mistakes. Like this, like, you exist here for a purpose, and to find that purpose is going to be individual, right? Everyone has a different purpose, a different way to show up. But I would say, like, you know, find your own voice, and you don't have to also be gay a certain way, right? I use the phrase, do gay your way. It's like, you get to decide what that means to you. You get to decide if you want to share this with the world. If you don't, you know, whatever that path is for you, it's going to be unique. And so find your own meaningful, purposeful life, and it's ahead of you. And it really, on the other side of shame, it does truly get better. It is a place where you can live in joy and happiness and self-fulfillment and love. And so I hope you can find that, and I hope you can heal those wounds of shame wherever they may show up. And then, so for your second question,
a little harder. I want to interrupt you though, because you reminded me of an experience I had. I wanted to share with my son, and we were sitting there talking one day. We talked about, you even mentioned this in the last podcast that we were in, and you know, we were talking about the idea of you know, being stopped or even damnation or that kind of thing is the stopping of progression, right? It's like, if you sat there and just didn't learn anything more, that would be hell, right? That would be hell to not learn anything. And so we were discussing this idea of, like, okay, then this idea of God, you know, whatever that means to any of you, but we were talking about, well, then how does that work? Because there's this idea that he's finished, you know, or that idea is finished, you know. And he sat there, he was a teenager, he's probably 16. And I says, what do we think about that? We were just asking questions. We weren't trying to come up with actual solutions. But he said something so profound. And he says, you know, I said, how would that work for there to be growth there? And his answer was, he thought for a minute, and in that silence, it was just magical, because he said, me, I'm the different. I'm a new experience. The way I see the world, the way I view things, the way I interpret things, the way I create things, that's different. That's new. And it was just this idea of, you know, I was so grateful. I was like, wow, that's so profound. How you see the things, all the little intricacies that make you, all the little qualities that you have are so unique. The most unique and precious commodity in the universe is you, and how you see and how you show up and how you act. So I don't know. I mean, I think there's growth, but I also think, wow, everybody's got to have a different take, or else it gets pretty boring pretty quick. And how that actually adds to this idea of God, your uniqueness, your specialness, your individuality, your autonomy actually has purpose, I think, in that way, in that it grows and expands even this idea of God, right?
So, as we've talked so much about shame and the devastating impact it can have in our lives, when someone is being vulnerable and sharing something that maybe they haven't even shared with that many people, and they are confiding in you to share that, like, that is such a, that's a sacred honor, because you can change their whole narrative about how they view themselves, about how they see themselves in the world around them. And this, it's a huge opportunity for them to love and accept themselves, and to receive love from you at a time that may be one of the most meaningful and impactful times in their life. And so I know with things that might bring up fear, like, oh my gosh, you're gay, what does that mean? If when someone is coming out to you or sharing anything that's like really heavy, if you can hold space for them without bringing up your own stuff, that is going to be very powerful and meaningful, and could truly change their life and change the direction of just how they move forward and how they relate with shame moving forward. So I just first want you to recognize what a huge honor and opportunity it is to help them heal. And it doesn't have to be anything. It could just be simply listening to them and reacting with no judgment, and being able to give love. And it's like, I thank you so much for sharing. I am so grateful you felt you could share, and just know I love and accept you just how you are. And you know, you mean the world to me. And what even like goes even further is asking questions to help you understand them more. Not questions around like, again, like not like with a purpose to connect and to understand means a lot. So if you can show love, hold space, and understand more, and so asking, you know, well-meaning follow-up questions, that is always great. Not questioning them as far as like what do you mean kind of thing. It's more like, help me understand what that's been like carrying, you know, the secret your whole life, you know, and stuff like that. Like that can really be powerful. And then also continuing that conversation, like one of the things, you know, you share something super vulnerable that's scary and feels like a dark secret. And then if people continue to treat it like a dark secret, like around you, like, oh, we don't talk about that, then it can reignite that shame. It's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have brought that up. So if you can find ways of like, by the way, how's that going? Like, how's, you know, what's it like, you know, after telling me, and what's, you know, what are you thinking? You know, do you feel comfortable sharing with anyone else too? Like having a continual conversation, so it becomes less hidden and scary and more just like, okay, like it's in the light and we just talk about it like we talk about the weather kind of thing. That can be very helpful to normalize that high energy topic that can carry a lot of energy.
Yeah, I love that. I think, again, I've had to, in my own life, you know, getting used to this, you know, becoming aware of the sensations in my own body, you know, because you'll start, if you're uncomfortable, your own muscles are going to start, you know, maybe tensing up a little bit, or you're going to start, you know, whatever it feels for the person. But when I become aware that that's happening in my body, that's my body reacting, not them. They have no control over that. So I can just quickly, I can say, okay, there that is. Oh, I'm a little nervous. Let it, you know, like, okay, there it is. And just by acknowledging, sometimes we do that. Sometimes, you know, I even tell people, just kind of put your hand on your heart just so that you can connect with that real space inside you. Cause I know there's this true self, this higher self, this whatever that is, the self with a big S, I think that they call that, you know, that really is just in connection with this other person that doesn't have all, doesn't have all those judgments. And so try and connect with that. But I love your idea of, maybe it's not just a one-time event. Maybe in that moment, you do your best, and whether it goes well or not, coming back to it later, coming back 2 days later, 3 days later, hey, I just want you to know, I really appreciated you sharing that with me. And it's not lost on me how important that was in your life, and that I do want to show up for you in a way that would be supportive and helpful for you, not just in this moment, but for the rest of, our experience together as connected beings. But I think relationship is how we heal. So let's not cut off relationships when it's not necessary. We have things to grow and things to learn from all the people around us. And so maybe at this point it feels like a big opportunity, but like I say, I think we put 100 years on this. I think this conversation becomes just non-important, maybe just every day. I don't know. We'll see. We will see. Maybe I'll be surprised. I'm open to being wrong, but I just think the trajectory of history seems to move towards love and acceptance. And I really am grateful that you're willing to show up, being who you are. Because I'm telling you, as you show up in your authentic self, I feel like it gives me permission to show up in my authentic self. Just by you being you, there's an energy exchange that just makes me feel like everything's great in the world, because we're in this flow of exchange of being who we are, and not hiding behind or that shame causing some distress between us. So I'm grateful that you're willing to have this conversation with me. And I want to know, how has being able to call that, to say I am a gay man, for you to do that, how has that added to your wholeness? What was that like for you to get into congruence with that truth in your life?
So I know the word gay can be a pretty charged word. I know, especially for those who are a little bit older than me, again, it brings up that shame response, because, among society, they had such a negative connotation for that word. I came out at 17 years old as gay, and I've kind of, in some ways, like, taken out the negative charge to that word. And so, but it was there. I mean, I had some resistance to that. But now I call myself the gay man's wellness coach. That's actually how I market myself professionally. And it's been interesting to kind of marry my branding to the word gay. And I want to reduce the maybe the embarrassment and the shame that exists around that word. It's like, I just want it to be like any other word that just describes an individual's experience. And so it's been a journey for me to do that, but I've had a lot of experience, and it's been a lot of years since I've been stepping into this label for myself. And I also respect people's, choice in not choosing to identify with labels and or how they choose to identify. This has been an important part of my journey and has helped me connect with others in this community. But for others that they may not have that same purpose or goal. Maybe another label is more important to them. So there's a lot of different ways of approaching things, and I definitely respect it. But for me, it was nice to find release from that shame and from those negative feelings associated with being gay. And now I'm like on a mission to help others. And part of why I call myself a gay man's wellness coach is leading by example. And I know that some people won't, they'll be in the middle of shame and they won't want to meet with me because I use that in my marketing. And so, I mean, I get it. Some people, I won't be for everyone, but I want to lead by example and just show like there's nothing to be shamed about. And like, this is a really, I'm proud. I'm proud to be me. I mean, that's simply what it comes down to. I'm proud of how God has made me, and I will show up and shine, exactly how God intended me to shine, and I'll continue to grow and explore and evolve. But yeah, I'm going to do it in the best way that I know possible.
Feel empowered every day with wholeness videos, meditations, downloads, classes, and more by joining the Wholeness Library at thewholenessnetwork.com.